Welcome to another episode of Come Together. We're live. Tony Mecca, welcome. So happy to have you here, man. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I am phenomenal, man. I'm so excited to talk to you because, in my opinion, you have one of the coolest jobs out there. You have been an animator for over 2 decades now. So congratulations. That's crazy.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I've been lucky enough to what they call survive this industry for this long, which is awesome.
Yeah. I can't wait to get into this with you. There's so many things I want to know. The first, I guess, is how'd you get into this? Was this a passion, a childhood passion? Was this something that you wanted to understand how things work from the background, so you got into it like that? Are you generally technical? How'd this happen?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty easy, and I still have like core memories of this. I ever since being like little, have always wanted to go into special effects. Like that was my dream. I'm like, I want to do that. I want to make special effects for the movies. I remember, even back to Star Wars, watching it as, on VHS, and, the part where the Millennium Falcon and the X-Wings and everything in Return of the Jedi go in and blow up the Death Star from the inside. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's it. Like, that's it. I want to do that. And then I used to put together a lot of those, like, those Revell models, like those little model kits you can get at the hobby stores and stuff. Was obsessed with those, would do all the, like planes and boats and things like that. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's a lot of practical stuff. I can build stuff. I can paint. I can make things with my hands. I'm good at figuring things out. And then, of course, Jurassic Park came out.
Right.
And I was like, oh, dear God. And I looked at it. And I mean, I think it was right around when like PG-13 was like I was allowed to see it or not, So
Sure.
saw it in the theater, scared the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
And it was from there, I was like, they do this on computers. Oh, so, always had that obsession with kind of learning how to do this, how to work in the movies, how to do special effects, how to be behind the scenes and all that. And so when I went to college for it, I was like hell-bent on first you learn, okay, there's modeling, there's lighting, there's animation, there's all these kind of different aspects of all that. And I thought I was going to be a modeler because I went to one of those schools where they kind of teach you everything. You don't really specialize in one thing.
What does a modeler specifically do typically?
So yeah, a modeler is essentially in charge of just constructing in 3D the shape and the form of the actual things itself. And there's actually subcategories of that too. There's
like storyboarding almost.
It's building it in 3D. Right. So it's like you would model the character, or you would model the environment, or you would model the object or the spaceship,
That's cool.
Because there's even like subcategories in that. There's folks that are like specifically character modelers and environment modelers. And, like there's subcategories of those that people dedicate entire careers to that. And because I did a lot of that like practical, kind of like building little spaceships and doing all that kind of stuff, I was like, I'm going to be a modeler.
Yeah.
Well, it became kind of weird and boring to me because I was like, it's fun. It's cool to be able to kind of, create these things. It's a lot of times it's like sculpting in clay, but on the computer, which was cool. But then we did all these kind of different animation tests because we took classes in lighting, materials, explosions, VFX. And when I did animation, I remember I was just like, I fell in love with it. I was like, this is playing God. This is awesome.
What about it? Was just the pure being able to take an idea from your head and put on a screen?
I think it was like even starting out with things like the bouncing ball. So, animators, when they start out, they learn all the classic stuff. There's 12 principles of animation. You start out with, kind of basic drawing skills. Luckily, the school I went to was a fine arts college. So we did like, life drawing, color theory, all that kind of stuff. Cool. But it was like when I did the bouncing ball, just animating just a ball dropping, then you do like a bowling ball, then you do like a beach ball, then you do it just to understand that. I remember my brain going like, well, this is how it works because that's what it looks like. This is like, that's how a bowling ball drops. That's how a beach ball drops. That's, these things. And I remember seeing a lot of the other students and they're struggling so much. And I'm like, what? That's not what a bowling ball looks like. That's not like if you throw a beach ball and it bounces a few times, that's not what it is. And to me, it just came kind of naturally of looking at things and saying, oh, that's how they move. And then I really fell in love with it when you started combining it with acting, because then you started doing like, okay, now we can move characters around and,
Yeah. You have
get their,
variables, infinite variables.
exactly, yeah, and be able to just really tell stories as short as these small animations are. So that's, I fell right in love with animation, and luckily I got my first job in a video game studio called High Voltage Software right out of school.
Mhm.
And I went right on the Family Guy video game. So went
Wow.
from
So
yeah,
cool.
went from like, not really, just kind of like, okay, I kind of know a little about animation, and went right into working with the fuzzy
What's
door
that like?
animators.
So you get this job, you apply for a job. First of all, what's the market like when you're a college senior and you're trying to figure out what to do with your life? Like, is this like are there like I know for example, I was an English major, but
Hmm.
I mean, so for me there were pretty limited options to begin with. But like I know that for example, the more specialty programs, engineers, the business people, the CPAs, like they were, you could generally go like big firm or small firm or like startup-y kind
Hmm.
of vibe. What's the animation world like, or what was it like rather? When you were there,
Yeah.
leaving college, and was this a big deal that you got this job?
Yeah, I mean, much different than it was back then than it is now.
Hmm.
And even before me, when it was like, the early days of Pixar and ILM and stuff like that, it
Right.
was, very, very, very different. In terms of like the big, small, there's like the big studios, right? You look at, pure animation studios for movies. You
Hmm.
have your Pixar, your Disney, your ImageWorks,
Hmm.
Real Effects. You have some of these kind of bigger name studios. Blue Sky, unfortunately, they are no longer around, but they were one of the big ones.
Hmm.
And Illumination,
Yeah,
DreamWorks,
they're
obviously,
huge. Yeah.
and so those are like the big ones, right?
What was
Those
the
are like
one
the
that
big
John
studios.
Lasseter moved to? I think Apple uses them a
Oh
bunch.
yeah,
They
it was
did
the one that did
Lucky,
Luck. Yeah, that one. I forgot the us. Oh man,
Skydance.
Skydance. Yeah, that's it. Yep. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Skydance. And then you have a few of the other ones. Micros, I think it was called, or I might be getting it wrong, but that's who did the Ninja Turtles
Oh,
movies, like
cool.
the new ones. So there's those I would call kind of medium-ish.
Hmm.
Where like the big ones are like the Pixar's, the DreamWorks, the Illuminations.
Right.
Those are like the big ones. Those are the hardest to get into. But it was kind of the same thing. Same thing with video game studios. You have your big ones, your EA's, your Ubisofts, your Nintendo first party studios, your like the big ones.
Hmm.
This was a indie studio, and there's a ton of indie studios still around. But it was cool because they did a variety of stuff. So like the first game was the Family Guy video game. So
Yeah.
got to work with the 2D animators from Fuzzy Door who animated the show.
Cool.
So learned from them, did a bunch of great stuff there. So it was I was one of, I think, 3 people in my entire graduating class that are still like in the industry, employed.
Wow. Is
One
that
of
for good reason or bad? Like, do people like convert to like more business side or like administrative side, or is that
it's
because
just very hard to get into.
right?
This is an industry that's like, you'll have maybe 1 or 2 openings on a project,
Hmm.
and there'll be 500 to 700 applicants. Like it's
Wow.
ungodly hard to get into.
Wow.
So I think, yeah, one of my buddies is
Hey everyone, real quick, if you're enjoying the show, click subscribe and rate the show 5 stars. Helps a ton. Thanks so much.
went to go work at South Park, and he's still there. So
Cool.
I've been doing that for like 20 years.
Wow.
My college roommate, I think, went. He did a bunch of stuff. I think he's now working for Apple's like 3D department or something to do with that. And then the only other person that I know of worked at Midway Chicago, which was then branded NetherRealm Studios once they were purchased by Warner Brothers. So
Hmm.
he's been working on Mortal Kombat for like 20 years now.
Wow. Wow.
And other than
Awesome.
that, that's
Right.
all I know.
That's
Because
crazy.
yeah. So it's pretty cutthroat. It's less than, I don't know what the exact statistics are, but for a traditional 4-year college, and it also depends on what they call placed as well, because there's some terrible schools out there that'll be like, you got a job at GameStop, you're considered placed. It's like, nope, it's not what that means,
Mhm.
But it's less than 5% of students at a major university going into the game industry, film industry, things like that, actually get placed in the industry right out of school.
Wow. So what do
Yeah.
you need to get in?
So essentially how it works is, it's kind of school irrelevant, right? Like I tell my
Yeah.
students,
It's like coding kind of.
your grades don't matter. It's irrelevant. Like there are folks that have like rewritten the math behind how raindrops work that don't even have college degrees,
Right.
or high school diplomas for that matter.
Right.
Like so it comes down to what's called a demo reel.
Okay.
And what that is, and this is back in the day. This was when I graduated. It was like I had one VHS tape, but the rest were DVDs.
Okay.
They had like one, like just like one VHS tape, just in case. I'm like, all right. So, you essentially have just a few minutes, preferably a minute or less, to showcase your best work and say, here it is.
Right.
So a modeler will show like, here's all the 3D models I made. Animators will show, all the animation that they can do. Environment artists, things like that. And those reels are getting to the point now where they're tailored for different. Like I even tell my students, like it's different per studio. It's like if you want to apply to this studio, tailor your stuff more to this. If you want to apply to this studio, tailor it more to that. And I went into video games first only because that was like, I was like, well, I played games at the time. That's super interesting to me. And of course, as a college kid being offered a full-time position right out of school, literally. And I did it in 3 years because I'm not a fan of school.
Right.
I just don't like it. So I went out throughout the summers, and I got the bachelor's degree in 3 years. I just was nonstop. So I'm like, get me out of here. And so, someone that's like 20, 2021, and then it was like, hey, you want a full-time job in the game industry? And I was like, hell yeah. And
good for you.
I was there for like 5.5 years. And to this day, the owner and founder of High Voltage, I still am in contact with, great studio. They're still doing great stuff. But that's where I really got to push animation. But the reel that got me in, I showed kind of a little bit of everything. And because I was a little bit more technically minded too, they had me on Family Guy. It's like, okay, you're going to run some animation support, but then you're also going to, I remember this because it was one of those like core memories, of getting into the industry. They're like, okay, you're also going to help us with doing some of the assets and stuff for the PSP. Because I think the game came out on PS2, Xbox, and PSP.
Wow.
And the PSP, you had to really, really, really reduce, to get it running on that, tiny, tiny little thing. And they liked the animation that I did so much that I never did anything other than animate.
Wow.
So that's where I kind of like fell into it. Yeah.
And how much of video game animating skills or what you learned from that carry over to other aspects of animation?
So, I mean, a lot of it, it's a very different industry, the game industry and the film industry. So when I started in the game industry, so what I do, I did the Family Guy video game, and then I did America's Army, which was things like the Xbox 360 port of that. So it went from like super cartoony. The first thing I ever animated was a stripper.
Wow.
Ever. And well, like professionally. And I remember being like, how the hell do people wear high heels? This doesn't make any sense. This is like, it goes against all the laws of physics. And it was just like, what the, so I remember breaking my brain over that. Then I went on to 2 projects, the Conduit and Conduit 2. I was a mocap cleaner on BioShock. So they did that, the motion capture at Red Eye Studio, which is High Voltage Software's motion capture studio. So was able to, I had no idea how big the game was going to be. Like that game is like still to this day considered like a legendary, like S-class title. So I got to, kind of learn motion capture and things like that on that particular game. And then Conduit 1 and 2, I really dove more into the technical side of things because we had to develop a first-person shooter system for the Nintendo Wii. How does that work? How do you look different? Like with the Wii, you aim with that, like the Wii mode on the screen. So now all of a sudden, the arms are now kind of unlocked and you can look at things from different directions. And it's things like, okay, well, if you do a reload, looking to the left and you're reloading the cartridges, whatever's happening with the sci-fi guns and all that kind of stuff. But you're aiming to the left. Now all of a sudden you're seeing inside of his armpit. Yeah. And you're like, oh, how do we solve for that? How do we do, so it was really cool technical challenges there. But then also did a lot of creature and monster animation. So I did, I just dove right into it. I loved it. I fell in love with it. I was like, this is awesome. This is I was like doing monsters and, soldiers getting eaten and all these really cool kind of things. I was like, this is amazing. I was having the time of my life. But
do you have creative liberty while you're making them, or you're sticking to a script?
Again, it's different in every studio, every project, everything. On that particular set of games, which ate up like almost 4 years of my life, it was, okay, we have to make the best, coolest sci-fi first-person shooter on the Wii with the best graphics, period. That was
Right.
the mandate.
Right.
And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to make this whole new first person system that's going to be awesome. And it ended up winning a ton of awards, which was great. So
Wow.
there was actually a lot of creative free, probably too much for someone my age.
No, that's good. That's how
you
things
know?
get done, I think, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. It was I was handed a lot more than I probably should have at that
yeah.
age, but I was having a blast with it. And I guess the extremes would be you're making your own game at home
Mhm.
and you have 100% creative freedom versus you are animating on a massive movie that the director and everyone knows exactly what they want. And
Right.
they're like, we're going to motion capture this. That's going to be it. Clean up the toes. And that's what you're going to do for the next 2 months. So it goes all the way from complete, incredible open creativity of how you want to bring your, some of your vision into what you're animating,
Mhm.
or you're a cog in the machine and that's it.
Right.
And it's everything in between.
Right.
So it's
Right.
different kind of per project.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. And so it
So
sounds like you got your hands dirty with a lot of the creative stuff.
yeah, I got it in my hands with the creative stuff. We developed a whole system, won a bunch of awards at E3. But at the
What's
same
E3?
time, though, E3 was like the big video game convention. It was
Okay.
called the Electronics Expo.
Mhm.
And traditionally, I mean, that's where like, the Dreamcast was announced and the PlayStation was announced and the
Wow.
PlayStation 2 was announced
Okay.
and the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Like that's where they used to have these massive conferences, multi-day conferences, and they would, announce the biggest, new games and new game consoles and, huge conferences.
Mhm.
And both times, we had a pretty, big showcase on the show floor and I was able to, they flew me out and I presented it and all that kind of fun stuff.
Wow.
But another thing was also going on in my life, which was there was an identification inside the animation industry where and by they, I mean we'll call it the movie industry at large, was not getting talent that they needed. Because the universities, and this is something unique that happened to me, started getting accredited. And when you're accredited, part of the accreditation process, the laws have changed and there's different rules and things now. But at the time, and still at most universities, if you want to teach any degrees or terminal degrees, you
Mhm.
have to have at least a master's.
Yes. Right.
And there
That's
was no
my
master's in
problem. I wanted
animation.
to teach college, but I'm not going back to school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what ended up happening is, I'll give you a perfect example. I had a 2D animation teacher in college in Chicago, where I went, John McClanahan, who was the animation director of Tiny Toon Adventures and Pinky and the Brain, if you remember those. Like,
Okay.
legendary guy. Huge 2D animator, didn't have a master's degree because, you don't need it.
Mhm.
Because you're working in the industry.
Yeah.
Well, college got accredited, immediately removed him and brought in
Wow.
someone that
Interesting.
never worked a day in their life.
Wow.
Well,
So it
they have
became about
masters.
animation theory instead of animation.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. And what they were teaching was just wrong. They're just like, well, this is how I imagine it would be done. So a bunch of
Huh.
folks got together, 3 guys, two from Pixar, one from ILM. And they created an online school called Animation Mentor. And their whole thing was like, to hell with traditional college.
Mhm.
And this was like before Zoom. This was before like,
What year was this? Around what
I
year?
don't know.
In the early 2000s?
Early maybe. I mean, I can look it up, but it was a few decades ago. But this was definitively before Zoom, and
Okay.
when Skype maybe was kind of a thing. But they created, what was genius about this is they created an online animation school that essentially was like, anyone working in the industry, from the big studios, from, animation studios, Pixar, ILM, all the, DreamWorks, all the big ones. And they
Mhm.
said, who wants to make extra cash? And all these animators were like, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And so they said, in the evenings, we will, custom make these video conferencing tools, as well as things that you can draw on and stuff. And we will teach animation, but we're going to teach them exactly how it is. We're going to say, look, this is I remember at the time, one of my teachers was working on Up. One of them was working on the original Spider-Man, like the Tobey,
Wow.
Maguire one, like that. So that that level of just, and you would do it, in the evenings generally, and they would run you through it. It was like kind of a 1.5 year program.
Right.
And so I did that at the same time because I still had that itch. I still had that like, I want to work in the movies. I want to work in the movies. I want to work in the movies. You
So you
know,
went to the school you taught?
so I went to the school.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
I was in my early 20s still.
Right.
And early to kind of mid 20s. And so I went to the school because there was a few other animators at High Voltage that did it.
And you're still a
Uh,
Family Guy at this point?
no, I was on Conduit, like tail end of Conduit 2,
Okay.
the sequel.
I
And
think it was around 2008 or 9, by the way. I think that's when Up came out and maybe
yeah,
Spider-Man. So
got it.
maybe,
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
around
around
that
that.
era, yeah.
Okay.
And it sucked because it was working full time,
Mhm.
in animation, and then going home and animating for school all
Yeah.
night and all weekends. Like I didn't see my family, I didn't see my significant other. I saw nobody. I lived and breathed this. And
Yeah.
so I did that program, and that really concentrated on like acting and motivation and how you bring soul to characters,
Right.
and really 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 said to hell with whatever a college curriculum, and this is what you need to know to get hired in the industry. That's like what it
Mhm.
was. And it was
Mhm.
awesome because a lot of these things kind of got lost to time, because if you were working in the industry, you certainly weren't teaching, and if you were teaching, it generally meant at the time you weren't good enough to get in the industry. That's all that
Right.
meant.
Right.
So it's this kind of catch 22. And CG movies and special effects and everything were getting really popular. And they're like, where are we going to find these animators at?
Yeah.
you know?
Wow.
And so they were just like, they created this school, which is awesome. So I ended up graduating from the school around the last project, Conduit 2, that, I worked on. And I got cold called from a studio called Rhythm and Hues,
Okay.
one of the big Academy Award winning, major studios out there, multiple, Academy Award winning for visual effects. And they cold called me because they saw my reel. To
Okay.
this day, I still have no idea where they saw my reel, where it was posted, who shared it, someone from the school, someone I don't know.
Mhm.
But they call me and they're like, hey, you want to come work on a movie? So I was like, hell yeah.
I'll leave
So
my job right now.
I'm
Let's
like,
go.
see ya. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was tough. I remember it being like, look, I'm leading a full-time job with benefits. They offered benefits and things like that. But in the movie industry, generally it is contract based. You're only on for the movie. That's
Right.
it. Once the
Right.
movie's done, they can't guarantee you work after that.
Yeah.
So packed up all my stuff, moved out to LA.
Whoa.
Went into, worked at Rhythm and Hues, which was an incredible studio. They had all custom software. Worked on Mr. Popper's Penguins, Alvin, believe it or not, Alvin and the Chipmunks 3 to this day.
Yeah.
It's called Alvin and the Chipmunks 3 Chipwrecked. As stupid as that movie is, it has got some of the best animation
No
in it,
way. Really?
because
So my
two
3-year-old will
things.
like it? My 3.5
Oh my!
year old?
Adults would like it. Like
Okay.
we had so much stuff in that, but the director was the director of Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo.
I don't even know what that is.
And it was that like Rob Schneider movie.
Okay.
It was like really, it's like crazy movie. And he's just like, yo, we all know what this is. We're just gonna have fun. I don't care. He's like, I have
Yeah.
two rules. If you make everyone laugh during dailies, which is when you show your shot to the director and everyone.
Uh-huh.
If people laugh, I'm gonna prove it. We're good.
Yeah.
If people, if one of them, if he goes, I gotta remember. He's like, if the fat one gets hurt, then it's approved.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible show. It was very difficult because it was, if you think about as crazy as it is being a kid movie,
Mhm.
incredible amount of technology went into it, because it was usually 6 characters in the scene at once, usually running around all over
Yeah.
these real shot humans, and there was fur. And they wore clothing on top of it. So you were talking about like fur simulations, undercloth simulations, while interacting with, running up arms and legs and, all the, like, it was nuts. It was crazy how complex it was. And a lot of the folks that worked on Alvin and the Chipmunks 3, if you look through the credits, a lot of those animators are like, supervising Disney movies, Pixar, DreamWorks.
Wow.
It was that was like the last kind of, I guess we'll call it quote unquote wave, where there was like a big kind of re-renaissance of talented animators
Uh-huh.
came from that. So if you look at any of the like supervisors of our big favorite movies, the odds of them working on Alvin and the Chipmunks 3 is pretty high. Which
That's
is hilarious.
crazy. It's such a cool fun fact.
Yeah. So
But this stuff usually eats up budgets, though, right? Like, I mean, some of the biggest, like when you hear about these movies having crazy budgets, especially in like especially early Pixar days or Disney days or
Mhm.
Marvel days, where it takes years. I was reading a book about the MCU recently, And one of the things I was reading about was that a lot of times the animators will start, or the animation house will start working on the animation far before they have a script or they even have signed talent a lot of times. Like they have a
Yeah.
general idea of what they're starting to work on. So this is a huge part of like the budget, right? Like it's a big deal.
Kind of. It is. It really depends, and this is where the industry gets very difficult, and I guess we'll call it interestingly tragic, I guess is the way we'll
Okay,
call it.
sure.
Kind of Shakespeare-like.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right. So think of it like this. All right. So Rhythm and Hughes doing amazing. Worked there for a while. Got promoted to a lead. So I was a lead on then Snow White and the Huntsman,
Mm.
X-Men Days of Future Past. That was just the main. There I was. Snow White and the Huntsman, and then R.A.P.D. with Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Bacon.
No way.
And
Yeah, sure.
so Snow White and the Huntsman was nominated for Best Visual Effects, and also Life of Pi, that movie with the
Yeah,
tiger
sure.
in the boat. Ang Lee's was nominated for Best Visual Effect, also done by Rhythm and Hughes. All of our friends right down the hallway, right? So double nomination. Life of Pi wins, and it's like incredible. It's amazing. We're like, oh darn, we lost, but also, yay, good job, all of our friends. 2 weeks later, the entire studio goes bankrupt and
Whoa.
shuts
Well,
down. Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Because that's, the budgets are very, very, very high. The bringing on that many animators and talented artists and everything is not cheap. But also, there's the problem, especially with the Marvel movies, that these directors generally aren't visionaries, they're more reactionaries. So they'll say things like, oh, show it to me this way, 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 this way. Spend like 2 months on doing it, and then 9 times out of 10, they'll just go back to the first version that they picked. And you're like, well, we could have not wasted 8 months. So there's a lot of that kind of goes on. But it was an amazing studio, absolutely lifelong friends there. It was incredible. Then I went on the other side of the fence, over to Blue Sky Studios, where I worked on Epic and Rio 2. So when working in video games, everything is, like computer generated. Like you could move the camera, you can do whatever you want. You have your character, blah, blah, blah. And we'll talk about a little bit of the, more differences later. But generally, it's generated entirely on the computer, right? When you go into full CG movies, right? The stuff DreamWorks, Pixar, Illumination, all the, all of our favorite movies do. It's, again, same thing, generated entirely on the computer. So technically, you can kind of move the camera wherever you want. You can kind of, because you're in charge of generating everything in the scene. It's all pretend. It's all make-believe.
Right.
Well, when you do visual effects, they shoot live action, and then you have to insert the visual effect into the shot, right? So I went from video games to special effects. So learning how to use what's called plates, which is where they shoot the background, and then working your animation into what was already shot, essentially. And then over to Blue Sky, where I worked on Epic and Rio 2, which was
full animation.
Like full animation, yeah.
Wow.
So I'm like, oh, wow, now,
Cool.
So it was kind of like, in those short few years, I got exposure to like the entirety of the industry.
Yeah.
Like
crazy.
Everything. Which is nuts, because generally, and again, this isn't, always the case, because there's no rules in animation, but generally it's like, okay, you work in visual effects, or you work in games, or you work in, full CG.
Yeah.
Yes, there are animators that bounce around a little bit, but that's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
I've been blessed or crazy enough to do both and everything in between, so
you might be blessed because you're crazy enough. It's a good thing.
I think it's part of what it is. Yeah. It's just kind of like, no fear. Let's do it. I'll learn how to do it. Then went back to, I was up in Vancouver at the time. Went back to Vancouver. I was at Digital Domain.
Yeah.
Another, massive studio, Digital Domain. That was James Cameron's studio.
Sure,
Titanic. Yeah. I was Adam Soup on Fast and Furious 7, X-Men Days of Future Past. So then went right back into visual effects, right? From like super stylized birds to visual effects. Then after that, went to ImageWorks, where I worked on Hotel Transylvania 2, which, believe it or not, that style of animation, you think of like Hotel Transylvania, Clyde with a Chance of Meatballs, Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Infinitely more complex than anything else, hands down.
Yeah.
Like, hands down. Because
I think you can see it, even as a consumer, you can tell, right? Like, even the most casual observers like have this feeling that something more intricate's going on there for sure.
Yeah, it's because, you can pause any of those movies and each frame is a masterpiece. Because a lot of them have to look 2D, but it still needs to be generated in kind of 3D to give that cool, fun, hyper stylized look.
Yeah.
And, I
That's what
remember going
metaverse
on.
is so cool.
Yeah, it's I remember going on to Hotel Transylvania and there being like almost 3 weeks of just training. Of just being like, this is how you do it. This is how the director,
Wow.
Gendy Tartakovsky likes it. This is how we do this. And the complexity between how crazy the models were, how
Mhm,
insane the rigs were. I
mhm.
mean, the troll on Snow White and the Huntsman, like that had muscle systems and these like complex skin and all this crazy stuff. Didn't hold a candle to like Drac on Hotel Transylvania.
Wow.
Like because it was
Wow.
so cartoony and so stylized. It's so extremely complex that it truly it's a computer breaker. I mean, it would take me sometimes hours to even just slightly be able to preview what one of my shots looked like running at 24 frames a second. Like it
Right.
was, crazy. Then after that, I got hired at Magic Leap. It was a kind of top secret unicorn AR company down here
Okay.
in Florida.
Oh,
Did a
really?
lot of,
Which part of Florida?
they were in Fort Lauderdale area.
No way. Really?
So yeah,
Right in
they
my
they
neighborhood.
raised like $1 billion from Google, and it was kind of assembled a team, um, and they really had this really cool technology with like AR, augmented reality, things like that.
Mhm.
And I was in the division that had to do like, okay, now how do we tell stories in this?
Right.
So then I started kind of writing and coming up with stories, and instead of doing movies or games or something that was part of a bigger kind of
Right. You're
picture.
doing narrative now.
Yeah, this was like, okay, now I'm in charge of this, so
Cool.
being able to do like shorts and things like that and this new technology was really, really, really cool. Kind of like a new way of telling stories. This was around the time where kind of VR was kind of big too, and there's a lot of studios doing like VR shorts,
Mm,
trying
mhm.
to find out like how do we do an episode of television if you can walk around your house,
Yeah.
and kind of see it anywhere? How do you do a animated short, if you can see it on your table in front of you, like
Yeah.
that kind of really cool storytelling. So I worked with for a little bit of Imagineering there because they did some stuff with Disney, and so kind of
Cool.
got really tied
What are they
into.
like? The
Um,
Imagineers.
they're really cool. I mean, it was I can't say what the IP was, but it's one of the biggest
No
ones in the
problem.
world,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
But
they
the temperament or the general like,
um
because I know that
they're
Disney's such a monolith, but like they're known for being creative, so I'm curious what like that
yeah
the
they're
creative jobs like.
it was very cool. They were very guarded of the particular IP.
Okay.
So it was a little challenging because it was one of those like it had to be perfect and
Mhm.
it had to be done their way, but it was incompatible with how that was presented normally in the movies because this was a full in your world kind of
Right,
thing.
right, 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 right.
So it was a lot of kind of discovering with them,
They've been
and
messing
saying,
around with the VR world for over a decade now, Disney, right? They've been like with in and out with the parks and everything for a while, right?
oh yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone has. I mean,
Okay.
everyone's been doing, like we have the Mario Kart attraction, right? And that's all
Right,
AR,
right, right.
so it's like everyone's been kind of in that, zone. Um, but it was just one of those things where like I was able to train my brain to think differently, to say
Yeah.
like, okay, we're not just looking at a square in front of you, right? Like we're not doing that anymore. And being able to that's where I was able to say, okay, I'm going to take half my video game skills, half my movie skills, and combine them into something kind of brand new, right? What's
Yeah.
the next generation of kind of storytelling?
Mhm.
Um, and then unfortunately that, that company ended up going, I mean, they're still around like barely, but they ended up, kind of not folding, but essentially just nuking their entire storytelling department. They're like, bye, and so here I am stranded in
Yeah, by the
Florida,
way, you
like,
guys are the creatives are the first ones to go when anything like this
oh yeah,
happens
yeah,
anyway, you know?
exactly, yeah. And it's like cool.
Mhm.
But then immediately through some really good mutual friends, got a job at EA for a little bit because EA
Cool.
has their Madden studio down here. So I was able to work on Long Shot, which was like the Madden story mode.
Mhm.
So was able to kind of do that, helped him out with a bunch of like facial, animation stuff. But then I was like, well, what else is out here? Like we're in the middle of,
Yeah.
Florida. And then I was like, I mean, I mean, Yeah, I used to vacation at Universal when we were kids. Like
Mhm.
fly down, and you get all excited because you see palm trees, and you're like, "Oh my god, we're on vacation!" And
For sure.
it was like, this is crazy. And so applied for some positions there, and then 11 interviews, and 9 months later, they
Whoa.
like
What do
got
you
my
do for those
position
9
there.
months?
I was still at EA.
Okay.
And I was just, I mean, and they were all day interviews too. They were like, 5 to 7 hour, like all day interviews.
Whoa.
And that's when I learned how crazy that industry is, because I was like, it kind of dawned on me. I was like, yeah, people got to build all this stuff. Like
There's a lot riding
there,
on it.
there's a lot about it. And then my industry, particularly coming from film, you heard of Imagineering, you heard of Universal Creative, but you never really understood what they do. And they didn't really merge with the film stuff that much, where it's like, if you need to do a ride, maybe they'll bring in some people from the film studio to help do it, but you weren't really exposed to a lot of that unless you were in a very specific part of the organization on whatever studio that you worked for. So it was just one of those, like, I love theme parks.
Mhm.
I got season passes there.
Yep.
This is awesome. And so I, went in, and 100% of my theme park knowledge is on the job, like
Wow.
literally on the job. And I,
So
I do stuff with
freaking
schools for
cool,
them, and
man.
I do like training courses and things like that. But it was just, there. But then I also, for almost 10 years now, started teaching animation. So I teach at Anim School, which is one of the competing ones that I graduated from, online schools. So it's only kind of,
Yeah, Benedict
yeah,
Arnold
which is,
all over here.
yeah, exactly. So, but it's cool because like the placement rate is huge. But I teach the graduating class, which is called Animating, Appeal, and Entertainment, and that's all about like acting and motivation and
Nice. You seem like, by the way,
storytelling.
just even from talking to you, I could tell you're gonna be you're great at that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I try.
Yeah. You got a lot
But
of
that's
enthusiasm.
literally
Yeah.
just okay. What do we think about? How do we give these characters soul? What is the story behind this? Like, how do we
Mhm.
generate good storytelling? And then I also teach the only, essentially, because the school is accredited. But this is what kind of changed with the laws. Just kind of bouncing back on that, is now in certain industries, they, and by they I mean the powers that be of the government that does whatever accreditation, or whatever's part of the,
Yeah.
whatever
Whatever
people above,
arbitrary
way
rule they
above.
decide to set today, you mean.
Yeah, they were like, okay, you have to have a master's to teach, or if you have 10 years of experience.
Yes.
So it's that kind of stuff. So since I had 10 years, the school got accredited, and they're like, boom. So I teach the acting class there, and then I also teach the only essentially accredited monsters and creatures visual effects course there.
Cool.
So it
Wow.
goes from like, okay, let's talk about the motivation of this character. What are they trying to say? What are they doing? Never animate what they say, animate what they think. Really diving into that kind of stuff. Then I switched to the other class. I'm just like, I don't give a shit. Make it look badass. Like who cares? Like just okay. Well, what's the monster gonna do? I don't know. Look cool. It's going to be summer blockbuster. Like, make it look awesome, But then we talk about like drawing influence from animals, and how you do the study of animals to combine all the known to create the unknown, and things like that. So
Yeah.
even though I'm not in that particular industry anymore, it still keeps me very tied to that industry, and
And
very
based on your career, you might be
fresh.
back. So if, yeah, based on
Yeah,
how
yeah.
often you
I mean,
bounce
I like to
around.
retire here where I'm at, 'cause I'm like, this is awesome. I can
Mhm.
settle down. I don't have to worry about stuff.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, like, it keeps my pulse on that industry, which also helps. I think Universal kind of likes it too, because they're like, wow, you really do have a pulse on our sister industry. I'm like,
Mhm.
sure do.
Yeah. Don't
So it's
fire me.
advantageous for them as well. Yeah. But it's nice to be able to still do that, but bring a lot of that into the storytelling that we have. So I'm never in a million years would I've ever thought I'd have patents, and I have about 9 patents from Universal now.
Wow,
So
incredible. So cool.
animation related stuff.
Congratulations.
It's yeah, thanks. It's just very, never in a billion years expected my life to end up like it is now. It's just finding kind of that dream job that you never knew existed, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
Wow. There's so many places that I wanna go
Mm.
from here, man, because you
Yeah, man.
because you provided so much context in such a great way that I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly where to jump. First,
Yeah.
man, let me let me ask you this, I
Mhm.
guess we just kinda get the conversation flowing as far as what How do you we have a I think that a lot of people are tired with a lot of typical, big screen animation, big CGI. I don't know if you're familiar, there's a guy named Ben Fritz, who's a Wall
Mhm,
Street Journal writer and wrote this awesome book called The Big Picture,
mhm.
and one of the things are you familiar with the book?
No, 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 I'm not.
Oh,
I'm definitely
yeah,
gonna check it out though, yeah.
and he's great, and one of the things he was writing about was the fact that the reason why big studios make primarily big franchise movies and stuff like that is because it translates overseas really, really well, and since
Mhm,
overseas budget has been such a gold mine and a recently discovered one, a lot of the nuance in dramas like Good Will Hunting or Dead Poets Society or something like that,
mhm.
doesn't translate as well in China or Russia or Europe as it does or maybe Europe, but
Yeah,
South America as it would as Godzilla versus Kong or something like that. So
yep.
you do have like an explosion of IP of I guess big CGI films and from a teacher's perspective, and you're teaching students, and you're trying to come up with
Mhm.
fresh stuff. How do you deal with with a world that feels oversaturated, and how do you make it fresh?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question because, like, that's why if you look at the Minions, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so globally accepted because they don't speak any language. It's all pantomime. It's all,
Yeah.
it's all just very, very, very pantomime. And it's, interesting because we're also fighting against things like, TikTok and
Yes.
attention spans and things like that. It's like not a lot of, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and
Mhm.
sometimes they'll sit through an entire 2-hour movie if it's engaging, and sometimes they'll just like, yeah, I don't want to watch the anymore, we're done, and then just be like, I want the dopamine hit, I want the dopamine, just things
Yeah.
like, not that I let them do it like as technically nerded out as our house is, I kind of keep them away from,
Good for
iPads
you.
and things like that as much as I can.
Yeah.
But then there's times where I'm like, fine, just go play on your phone for half an hour. So it's like, like that kind of stuff. But it's you can very much see how the audiences have shifted in what they want to see.
Mhm.
Um, so I say the same things that I always tell my students because they're afraid of the industry. They're afraid of it. I'm like, look, the bottom line is this: if you can tell a compelling story, if you can tell something that is invokes an emotion, that is much more important than the quality of your animation, right? Because back in the '90s, you would go see a movie for the special effects.
Yeah, sure.
You'd be like, now this day and age, it's like, who cares, right?
Mhm.
It's good special effects cannot save a bad movie,
Mhm.
but a good movie can save bad special effects because you're
Right.
that engaged with the characters. So generally, as animators, especially on the student level, when you are, because this kind of parallels, what you're saying, like how do you keep things fresh?
Yeah.
You generally, when you construct shots, only have between maybe 10 and 15 seconds to do a shot because it takes a long time to animate, right?
Yeah.
Like the entire semester is a few months and it's only 10 to 15 seconds. That's it.
Wow.
Like that's it. That's all you get. And some animators even struggle to produce that amount of content at feature film level.
Mhm.
But all of it is, can you literally in 10 to 15 seconds, have someone turn it on, acknowledge the character, understand what's going on, and tell a little bit of a story, whether
Yeah.
it makes someone laugh, whether it makes someone feel something. And this is where, we always get into, this is going like deep into animation. It's like always animate what the character is thinking, not what they're saying,
Yeah.
right? That's where you
I
get
love that, by the way. That's awesome because
genuine.
it's so true.
Yeah, so a lot of the exercises that I'll do with my students is I'll say, okay, here's the line, and they have the line in their little software, generally Maya, right, is kind of what it's called.
Mhm.
Um, and the character is saying like, oh, nice dress, right? And I'm like, no, 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 you're not animating. You have a nice dress. So what I'll do is I'll have them actually, record on their phone or something the inner monologue of the character, and what they're actually saying is, oh my god, that dress is hideous,
Yeah.
and that's what you animate,
Right.
right? So you show that genuine emotion inside of what that character is actually saying, not out of their mouth. And if that can punch through, and you can do that, that's what makes it so you can almost put it on mute and
Mhm.
understand everything that's going on. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of stories, those are the kind of things that make animation, whatever form it is, in games and film and short story, or shorts, whatever that is,
Mhm.
from just being good to, timeless,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what's tough about it is we're getting this social media audience, I guess, and these kids are being brought up with that. But then you look at like the Odyssey, which just came out and that's gangbusters. People are like
Yeah.
fighting over each
Have you
other to go
watched it yet?
see the. I have not, because there
Okay.
is no. I think it's in. I think it's. It was either in Fort Lauderdale or Tampa, where they actually have a 70 millimeter
Yeah, in Fort
IMAX
Lauderdale, in the
projector.
Children's
Yeah, is that
Museum.
it?
Yeah,
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 that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, yep, that's it. And I was like, if I want to see this in the theater,
You gotta
because
see it you gotta get tickets a long time in advance, by the way. Apparently, it's sold
I
out
know
for weeks.
that's the problem. Yeah,
Crazy.
but it goes to show you. Look at that. And that's like a 3.5 hour movie. Look at the
Yeah,
people that flock to that.
yeah.
And it's like people are still kind of craving that
Do you
well
think that's what
done
it
long
is? You
form
don't think it's
storytelling.
you think it's I think a lot of that has to do with marketing. There's a huge marketing blitz, and these studios put in hundreds of millions of dollars into marketing per movie.
Yeah,
It's
but
po
I mean,
I think so. I do think so. I Is it 3.5 hour movie? Is that how long the movie is?
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, I could be wrong. I know it's on the longer side. See, but then you look at something like Obsession or Backdoors,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Obsession was done for pennies
Yep.
almost and grossed
750K or something like that.
350 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, you look at Backrooms, which was just like a YouTuber, right? So it's
Yeah.
like people are still genuinely craving fresh content,
Yes,
right? Like
that's true.
Obsession was brand new no name actors,
Yep.
no name director. Shot.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing was shot in like 4:3 to give it that kind of look.
Mhm.
It wasn't like crazy on special effects. They didn't have a special effects, CG budget. It was all done practically with makeup and stuff. And because it was a great movie, it
Mhm.
spread like wildfire and boom, like huge,
Yeah,
massively
massive.
huge. So it's one of those every single time you think you have it figured out, something comes along and proves you differently.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
I would probably attribute a lot of that type of success, like the Succession backroom success, to and even by the way, and the what was it? Project Hail Mary with Ryan
Mhm.
Gosling,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Barbie. A lot of these original IP movies that have been doing really well. I think that. The way I saw it actually put today, I read an article online, was the studio, the world, I guess the studios or the entertainment world is shifting from an Iger perspective of buying IP and basically elaborating on it until the audience gets fatigued to a
Mhm.
Christopher Nolan perspective, which is basically one-off experiences every
Mhm.
single time, something big swings. Sometimes he hits, sometimes he misses, but I mean, big swings that have been working for 3 or 4 decades now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we all know there's IPs out there where you're like, oh god, another one of these.
Well, I
You're
mean,
like,
how
well, you know.
crazy is it that I'm curious what you think of this, right?
Mhm.
Marvel, Avengers Doomsday is not getting any of the IMAX screens, and that's all going to Dune 3. How unthinkable was that
Yeah.
just
Right.
a
I'm
couple of
like,
years ago?
because it's so. I mean, there's so. I mean, I've got. I mean, I got some of the Marvel movies on like 4K. So I'm like, those are like benchmark movies and stuff. But I'm like, I am marveled out. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my god. Only reason I'm into Spider-Man is because my 5-year-old like loves Spider-Man, so he's like all into that. But
Mhm.
personally, I think the Insomniac Spider-Man video games were far better than the movies, and they have a lot more playtime and they're a lot more cinematic and they're a lot more cool. But I'm just marveled out. I'm just like, okay, how much more of this can we see? Like, I get it. No matter what happens, they're gonna find a time machine and they're gonna fix it all. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
but then you look at the whole like kind of John Favreau thing, and you're like, the story can be meh, but the characters are so strong and they're so just fun to watch, right? Like, who doesn't want to watch Tony Stark, right? Like,
I
that's
think that
just a
Jon
fun
Favreau is
character.
super talented and basically got a bunch of cushy jobs that he's happy to put his name on. But
Sure.
I think he like you could see. I mean, the original Iron Man was like. I mean, that was a Hail Mary. That was a Hail Mary project.
Mhm.
That was not a formula. That wasn't something that you were just gonna you had to cut and paste. This was a real risk, and
Yeah.
he's proven it. I also, by the way, I loved and maybe we could talk about this a little bit. The Disney's
Mhm.
or I guess the General Studios jump from animation to CGI or quote unquote live action. I thought the
Mhm.
Jungle Book was really solid. Of all of them, I kind of enjoyed the Jungle Book one of the most, and I think that was one of the first ones that Favreau converted over.
Yeah. So out of all of them, and I'm not a fan of them at all.
Okay.
I will admit, as grumpy faced as I went into the Jungle Book, I remember at the end of the movie, doing the like sad face brows up, being like, all right, that was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
That was a solid, but it didn't need to be live action. That's the thing. If
Yeah.
that was full CG or 2D animated, it would have been irrelevant, right? Like
Mhm.
what made it good was the great characters, the great acting, The great story. It was a really compelling story with a
Mhm.
lot of things at stake, which was awesome. And it's just live action or not, it would have been exactly the same.
Right. Right.
And it was just one of those like I haven't met a single person that was like I loved this version of the live action one because it was live action, right?
I teach high school, and my students don't know the original Aladdin movie. They think I asked them about
Oh
Aladdin,
wow,
they asked whether was it Will Smith played the genie or
yeah,
something
Will
like that?
Smith, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
they're like, "Who's Robin Williams?" I'm like,
I'm like, oh my
I showed them
god.
4 movies. I showed them 4 movies after that. I'm like, "Guys, this is not acceptable. This is
What they
crazy."
think about that? Did they see like? Did you show them original
They
Aladdin?
I didn't show I which one did I show them? I showed them, Dead Poet Society.
Hmm.
I showed them I didn't show them another I didn't show them the original Aladdin one. I showed them one other one, I don't remember. I showed them 1 or 2, Rob and then I showed them the outtakes. I showed them of a video of the outtakes and the spoofs
Hmm.
and the crossover between the animators and Robin Williams as they're
Yeah.
improvising a lot of the lines and coming up with the bits, and I mean, that must have been a hell of a treat to, to sit in a room
Oh
with
yeah.
that guy and hand him a spoon of Coke or something like that and be like,
Yeah. Oh
"Well, get
yeah.
at it," you know?
Exactly. Go nuts, man. I mean, just like talk about just a genius,
Yeah.
of just storytelling. But yeah, it's so funny because I'm like, there are certain people that are like younger than me in their kind of like mid 30s that are like, yeah, I've never seen any of the Indiana Joneses. I'm like, okay, what? How
I'm
did you?
guilty, man.
Yeah.
I've watched a lot of great old movies. I've watched a lot of great classics, and Indiana Jones, it just never stuck to me, but I've watched a lot of it. I mean, I grew up on Star Wars. I loved Star Wars, and
Yeah, yeah, but also Star Wars. There's some people who've never seen Star Wars, and what's
yeah.
funny is you'll put it in front. A lot of folks do this with like the original trilogy, and there's like, fine, I'll watch Star, and then they watch it and they're like, all right, that was pretty good, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I told you, like it's not
It's
because
compelling, but that goes back to your
it's
point that
compelling,
the
yeah,
story matters more than the animation.
more than anything, right? Like good animation does not fix bad story. It
Right.
just doesn't, and it really comes down to that. And there was
Yeah.
times where like, I remember eh, you know, back in the days, is really gonna like age me, but being like, okay, let's find out what movie's playing. Does it have special effects? Let's look in the newspaper. Let's look
Yeah.
at the, stupid movie phone you would call. I think there was like the Seinfeld episode about that. Or
Yeah.
just like you would literally have to call and be like, what's playing? What it is? Or you would drive by and see on the big marquees and stuff. And I'd be like, wow, I don't know anything about that movie other than I know it has special effects. I'm gonna go see that.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's it. And now you're just like, I don't care. It's expected.
Mhm.
It's really just this kind of, expectation that it's going to have it. And we've been so spoiled by, decent visual effects out there that if it doesn't look good or perfect, people are gonna kind of be like, ugh, something looks off. It's the uncanny valley. Like I can't put my finger like Polar Express.
Yeah.
People are like, oh God, it's you went too far. You're in that uncanny valley. But it's, and unfortunately we can't use it as a crutch anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You can't be like, oh my God, that movie was terrible. I hated all the characters. It was stupid. I fell asleep halfway through, but man, it was awesome because the special effects. Like, I mean, just go watch one of the Avengers movies. It's like you'll get everything you want in explosions.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's you can't rely on that crutch anymore. And that's where I think I'm happy we're starting to get a little bit of this resurgence in film where
Mhm.
people are so bored with just the same thing over and over and over and over again that now it's gotten to the point where the IP can't even
Yeah,
um
to maintain
for
itself.
the most part just maintain it based on the IP.
Yeah.
Like people saw Toy Story 5 and like, oh God, another one of these, and I know friends that even have worked
I
on it.
have
And
an
they're like,
allergic reaction even to hearing it,
yeah,
like
you're just like, oh, we've done this already, But it was a good, it was a fun movie. It was good,
Yeah, I have
And
to see it
the
still.
new Minions versus Monsters movies that Illumination did. People were like, oh God, another Minions movies, and the thing is sitting on like a pretty solid score on Rotten Tomatoes because it's really funny about the history of film and all that. Like, it's a genuinely like kind of funny, great.
Yeah.
Good story behind it, and I think those are the ones that are gonna push through,
Well, that's
right?
permissible, I feel like, because 'cause you're taking IP, but you're keeping it fresh, and I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's what made and it's what shows how hard it is to do is is Marvel's attempt to do that, or DC's several attempts to do that, post
Hmm.
Batman, but even Marvel's attempt to do that at post Infinity Legacy, where you
Yeah.
had where like they really probably took a dozen movies to try to find a new footing and like a new
Hmm.
fresh start. And I mean it does and I think Kevin Feige, I believe it was him, said that you kind of expect like this movie to just bridge to Infinity War and Endgame and just,
Hmm.
kind of snap out the previous 6, 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of, but it's the one thing that a lot of people forget. And I can't necessarily say who, right? And this is kind of just bringing everything into reality, right?
Mhm,
The
mhm.
actual reality, as as creative as I am, and it's really funny. A lot of people do this at work where they're just like, hey, what kind of engineer are you? What kind of engineer are you? What kind of engineer are you? And then they'll get to me and they're like, I'm like, I went to art school. I'm an art degree, So as creative as I am, right, storyteller, all this kind of, like creativity for me will always come first, even though I'm, a geek as well.
Mhm.
The biggest piece of advice a very famous movie director once told me is he says, if you want to make it, you have to remember that it's called showbiz, not show art. This is a business. And the people that make all the decisions on what movies get greenlit don't even watch movies. They
Yep,
don't care. They
that's
don't
right.
care. They're all hedge fund bankers,
Yes, sir.
right?
They gotta
There's
make their
no
money back.
core. Yeah, there's no correlation between Academy Awards nominations winnings and box office revenue.
Right.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not.
Well,
It's irrelevant to them. So it's
there's
like,
there's almost a
yeah,
direct correlation, this is crazy, between,
mhm,
sequels making more money because they're generally familiar and doing worse commercially.
yeah,
And so and studios are inclined to keep squeezing those IPs until that stops happening. But, like, again, each Toy Story movie made more money than the previous one for the
mhm,
most part, I think maybe except for maybe this last one, but like, I don't think that they got progressively better, I mean,
correct, yeah.
so, I
But they
mean,
didn't
it
get
takes this case
progressively
everywhere.
worse either. It was one of those like they're very, very, very good stewards of beloved characters, and they make
Yeah,
sure that they're going to tell an entertaining story, right?
yeah,
But the other thing is like that has that on it. Go put that. That's why we have like 9 Resident Evil movies,
yeah,
and like, and they're just like, what the hell's even going on anymore? They're like, who cares? Just fart it out. At minimum, people will go see it out of curiosity because it has this logo on it, whatever that is,
mhm,
and then we'll make our money back doing that.
yeah,
Like that's it.
yeah,
And to me, that's not movie making. That's just machine being.
it is.
So the key, like the golden goose of all of this, is
Mhm,
if you can create something, a film that is creatively outstanding and make a crap ton of money.
yeah,
Like that's the golden goose where you can be like, I got to say my vision or a bunch of art, because it takes an army to make these movies now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Everyone was satisfied with the product that they produced. It told the stories that they wanted to. Everyone was very proud of their work. Oh, and also the cherry on top is it made gangbusters, so it was a huge success. And that's very hard to do, right?
yeah,
That is really, really, really hard to do. But I think I'm happy that a lot of folks are, wanting to see Odyssey and they're wanting to see these, tiny little movies based entirely on like word of mouth. They're just like, "Do
yeah,
you see
yeah,
that? Yeah, it was awesome. You got to go see it. It was amazing." And it's we're always going to have the business decisions of like this IP we have to go. Just do it.
Did you
No
watch
matter what we
Disclosure
do.
Day?
No, not yet.
Not yet. I'm curious
Yeah,
what you think
it
of
is. It
that.
is. It is
Yeah,
tough with kids to get out to
yeah,
the
sure,
theater, but yeah,
sure. Yeah,
yeah. No, definitely want to see it.
I'm a
Yeah,
big I've recently become a UFO nut, so I was very
nice.
excited about it, but,
Yeah, and it's Reese and Spielberg. It's like, all right, I got to see what he's been up to.
yeah, yeah,
So,
and, I mean, yeah, for sure. Man, I wanna can you tell me a little bit about how, motion capture works and that kind of whole art or that side of the animation? Because that's really that's what everyone's doing now, right? That's all these
uh,
big tentpole that's big these big tentpole movies.
yeah, I mean, kind of. It's a mix. So you look at like Minions, the recent Mario movie, all the Pixar movies. I think even in I think it was Ratatouille. At the end credits of Ratatouille, they said, no motion capture or performance shortcuts were used in the making of this movie.
Mhm.
Kind of things that was all they wanted it to be artistry all done by hand. But really, motion capture is kind of, I mean, it's been used for decades now, but what really, really, really made it I guess, kind of mainstream and people were aware of it was, Lord of the Rings with like Gollum, right? Where what like Andy Serkis did with that.
Mhm.
He made a lot of enemies in the industry because he took credit for a lot of stuff that he did not do. But having said
That's
that,
the art world.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So, but having said that, he did pioneer that. And there is having someone like myself that has worked on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
There is motion capture that you capture, and you're like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Mhm.
This is amazing. This is exactly what we needed. This is going to save me so much time. And I'm just going to kind of finesse it as an animator. I'm going to push some things, pull some things, kind of massage it into place to make
Wait,
it
so
look
I'm
good.
sorry, can you explain just
Sure.
I don't I'm trying to the ground. So these guys are wearing
Yeah.
these
Okay. Yeah.
caption suits and they're acting and you're getting their footage of them and then you're animating on top of that. Is that what's happening?
So essentially, what it is it's they put on these motion capture suits, and now there's technologies out there that do it even without the suit, which is
Okay.
crazy. But what
Yeah.
it's doing is it is essentially assembling a 3D representation of their skeleton. Right.
Mm.
So as they're acting around in these stages, and traditionally, like the big ones that we've all seen with the little dots, those are retro reflective dots. So think of the same things on like stop signs, workers' vests,
Mhm.
where if you shine a bright light directly at it, it's going to shine that light way, directly back at you. And so what these cameras do is they're kind of big cage looking things like we've all seen on Avatar and, all those movies. And what they do is each one of those dots represents a specific part of the body of a skeleton of a person. So when they're, kind of walking around or moving around or doing their, whatever they're doing, these infrared cameras bathe the entire space with IR light, and they only see those dots. And what
Mm.
it's doing is it's tracking those dots and giving the computer a 3D representation of that character.
Mhm.
So instead of an animator having to go in there frame for frame, manipulate the skeleton of a character, every single frame 24 times a second or up to 60 times a second for video games, this motion capture does a lot of the heavy lifting by saying, hey, we captured this performance.
Right.
But things like fingers, it tends to not do very well.
Right.
So you kind of have like kids' mitts, kind of, where it will do your pinky, your ring finger, and your middle finger will be kind of tied together. And then you'll have your index finger and your thumb. And then
Right.
the animators have to go in there and do all that.
Right.
Then you think about the exaggeration of certain things. So some directors, like, I'll give you a great example, the creature on Snow White and the Huntsman. They were like, we want to bring in this acrobat that is going to act out like the troll and be the troll. And we're all like, I don't know about that. We're going to have to hand key this.
Mhm.
And so they put the stilts on the arms because obviously it looks, like the troll had much larger arms than a regular human, and capture the data. And then we put it on the troll, and it looked like a troll, but piloted by a guy with stilts on his arms. It didn't look natural, right?
Yeah.
It didn't look genuine,
Yeah.
right? So, and then we ended up just throwing all that away and just hand keying the entire thing.
Mhm.
But like I said, I've been handed shots where I'm like, wow, this is beautiful animation. This is great. I just have to touch up the fingers, touch a little bit up on the face, things like that. But then I've been handed motion capture data where I'm like, this is trash. This
Yeah.
is not at all what needs to happen for the scene or the shot. It didn't capture it right. It didn't, and then I end up just throwing it away and animating it from scratch anyway. So
Wow.
it goes both ways. What
Wow.
tended to die, which was great, was all the Robert Zemeckis movies, the
Mhm.
Polar Express, Mars Needs Moms, Monster House, Beowulf, like those, where they tried to do real, and it was uncanny valley, and it was kind of weird. And then the argument became, why didn't you just shoot it live action? Like, what was the point?
Yeah.
Like, why spend all this money and do all this stuff when it would have been cheaper and better and more authentic and look better if you just film the person?
Yeah. What's the
Just
answer? Right? What's the defense for that?
it's because they wanted to show off. That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
they
cool.
they
You had a cool
they
you had a cool image in your head. You had the money for it. You wanted to try something you wanted something artsy.
Yeah, exactly. And then and it's but those movies aren't around anymore because it's like what that's people just do live action. It's costing $500 million to make these things, or
Mhm.
whatever that that cost is. And it's like you could have dedicated that to live actors and awesome visual effects, and you would have
Yeah.
gotten the way better results. So it's the when you're trying to go for one to one is where things get weird with humans. That's why it's so successful when you look at Weta's stuff, right? Gollum, Avatar, where they have exaggerated features.
Yeah.
All of the Planet of the Apes movies. They're on, apes and different kinds of monkeys and creatures and characters and things like that that are still human-esque, but
Mhm.
exaggerated in certain ways that you really get kind of a cool, exaggerated performance. And you can still do a bunch of really great motion capture to capture the original actor's intent,
Right.
which is cool.
Yeah.
But when it comes into like super stylized stuff or things like, anything that Pixar would do, or DreamWorks or Illumination, or any of those studios, you're not going to use motion capture because it would look really weird on those characters.
Yeah.
Right? It would,
Yeah.
like, you would kind of lose it. But it's a tool. It's some animators are very hoity-toity about it, and they're anti-motion capture, and they're like, I will never use a performance shortcut like that, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, you had to animate a character getting up from a chair and walking to the left. Was that really that? Did you really want to animate that? Like,
Yeah.
are you going to die on that hill? Or like, was that so engaging to you? So it's one of those where it's like, one done correctly,
Mhm.
you shouldn't even notice that it's motion capture, right? It should just look awesome, right? And
Yeah.
again, get a most badass motion capture in the world, or badass hand key frame, animation in the world. If it's not a good story, nobody's gonna care,
Yeah.
and it's gonna get forgotten, to the loss of time. But yeah, motion capture, then they get into like facial capture too. So they do the faces, and they were with what's called
Right.
HMCs, head mounted cameras. And what that does is it's the camera that always looks at the face of the character.
I'm imagining Thanos
And
right now, by the way.
you're what? Yeah, oh
I'm
yeah, yeah.
imagining Thanos, right?
Yeah,
Like Josh
yeah.
Groban, that's his
Thanos.
name? Yeah. Or Josh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thanos. Know a lot about Thanos and a lot of tech with that team specifically. But and you look at like Avatar and all those, and they have the little camera that kind of points at their face.
Mhm.
Um, Problem turns into, now you have this camera that points at your face. So
Mhm.
you'll notice in all of those movies, they kind of keep their hands and the areas away from their face, because when
Mhm.
they were motion capturing, they got this camera pointed at them.
Ah,
so,
right.
so
And
you
it's so
start to
interesting.
pick
It
up
always
things like
makes
that.
humans look so detached. Like, if you wanna think about this from,
Mhm.
like, a storytelling perspective, like, hands near our face is almost always something that people do, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yep.
so it actually it almost builds in an aspect of personality to the characters when you're animating it.
Of course, yeah, and it's and so some movies will do that do use motion capture, but a lot of that is just hand keyed, like painstakingly frame for frame animated by those animators, doing every single finger, every single move of the cheeks, and the if someone
Wow.
itches their eye, or puts their hands on their cheeks, that's generally animated by animators. It's like, you
Yeah.
look at the latest Avatar movie, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that was all motion captured.
Mhm.
Then why was there like 300 animators? It's like it's not there to replace animators. It's there to be kind of like a force multiplier and a tool,
Yeah.
to help capture original intent from actors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for it. Video games do it a lot.
Mhm.
The reason video games do it a lot is because if you think of a movie, it's like, hour and a half, 2 hours of content.
Mhm.
A lot of these games are like 60, 70, sometimes 100 hours of content.
Wow.
So they got no choice.
Yeah.
Your choice is either hire every animator on the planet, or motion capture the stuff as quick as you possibly can, get it to an acceptable level, and then spend time on like the hero shots and the main characters and things like that. So
Yeah. Wow.
but no, it's
So
yeah,
fun.
yeah. It's
Um,
a tool.
I was reading a book, and I highly recommend it actually, because this kind of the intersection of like what you're kind of talking about, by a guy named Lawrence Levy, who was Pixar's CFO when the company went public.
Mhm.
Steve Jobs, actually before it went public, and Steve Jobs hired him to kind of to bring the company. Pixar was a mess, right?
Mhm.
Leading up to Toy Story, and I think that they had four different business models. They had outsourcing animation to other studios using the Pixar technology that I think Steve Jobs worked with George Lucas to get
Mhm.
or to acquire. Um, they would animate shorts, which is that initial, awesome storytelling, the lamp and Luxo and the Tin Toy and all the great ones. Um, One of my favorite things to visit in Disney in Epcot is the animated short thing. I go with I take my kids there every time, man.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a great break also from the 1,000-degree weather. Sit inside for
Of
a couple
course.
minutes.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and then full studios, and then there was, and then I think they were actually selling the computers themselves that did the CGI, right? And
Hmm.
Steve Jobs was losing his shirt over this, and they really, and he was trying to figure out like how come this business just like sucks, and
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Lawrence Levy was explaining, he had to try to figure out what was going on. He had to explain to him that, well, as far as at least the movie's concerned, because he was wondering why Toy Story was taking so long to finish, why it was so expensive, why they needed so much overhead. He's like, you watch this movie and you just take for granted the fact that there's a shadow that's rippling in the background, or that like when
Hmm.
the or when Buzz is when Buzz is and Woody are chasing the moving truck, and you have, and like every single leaf that ripples, every single blade of sunshine that makes its way through had to be put there because it was a black
Hmm.
screen. And he goes, and so, and that's why Pixar used to take 4 years for every movie. But I mean, there's so many things. I think I never thought of it until you're describing it this way as like really art. But it really is, and that comes with an enormous amount of risk because no
Hmm.
one says anyone's gonna like your art, and no matter how much
Yeah.
time you spend on it, like you could put an enormous amount of money and time and effort into something, and you have no idea what the consequences are gonna be.
Yep. And if a lot of the times it's, they're taking a risk on X, Y, and Z, and that kind of phrase of like, you'll never work in this town again. A lot of
Yeah.
that happens. You'll get someone that they take a risk on something and then they're just like, nope.
Yep.
But if you want a real interesting story, well, first of all, have you heard, going back to kind of how Pixar, do you know how like when John Lasseter actually knew and Pixar knew this was like a viable, like there was one particular moment that,
Yeah,
they knew.
stepping on the green soldier, right?
No, it
No?
was before that. It was during Luxo when they showed the Luxo lamp, like the little ball character going back, and
Mhm.
they did the little short,
Yeah.
and it was premiered at SIGGRAPH. SIGGRAPH is, ironically enough, I think SIGGRAPH is going on right now, and it is that's the computer special effects
Mm,
yearly geek trade show, right? And they
cool.
used to be massive. I mean, like they had job fairs there, and they have, that's where everyone would bring their DVD demo reels and stuff like that. Well, back in the 80s, they showcased the Luxo lamp, where it was the big little lamp,
Mhm.
and
Bring the ball. Yeah.
yeah, they showcased that, and it blew the industry's minds. They're like, "Holy shit, you did this on the computer! Like, wow, this is absolutely incredible!" And they would get a lot of questions like, "How did you do the cord? How did you get the light to reflect off of the ground? How did you?" They would get a lot of very technical questions, obviously, about how it was done.
Mhm.
But then someone came up and asked a very key question that essentially solidified it in as a way of storytelling. And someone asked, they go, "Was that the mom lamp or the dad lamp?" And that's when they were like,
Yes,
"We
sir.
got it. That's
Yep.
it." That
Yep.
they didn't look at the graphics. They didn't look at that. They acknowledged, like, I want to know, is that the mom or the dad? And
Mhm.
that's where you get to kind of, say, I kind of just blinked a bunch of pixels on a screen in front of you and created life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's where they're like, wow, we can actually do that.
Yeah.
Another very interesting story for people to check out. I can't recommend this enough because I've lived this multiple times in my career, especially some of the current things of being in innovation in this space and having to be at kind of the bleeding edge is the movie Jurassic Punk about Steve Williams. If you ever dove into that story,
No, I haven't.
um, that is a fantastic
Jurassic
uh,
Punk?
Jurassic Punk. Yeah, I think it's on Apple, the iTunes movies, and it's the story of Steve Williams,
Okay.
where he was a renegade. I mean, the guy was again, like your brain has to be on another level to work at his level, right? He
Mhm.
was the one that did like the Terminator, liquid effect for the T-1000. Like the guy was just another level in terms of insane, crazy genius. That
Mhm.
border of insanity and genius. Which is what the folks that, I mean, I go to recruiters and I go, I want your C students that make the teachers really angry because they do their own thing. That's who I want.
Mhm.
Like that's, go find those. And he was the epitome of that. He got in trouble all the time, and he was always in trouble with the studio system and everything. But he was the one that after Terminator said, "Hey, look, I think I can do these dinosaurs on the computer." And they laughed him out of the room. They're like, "No, you can't."
Yeah.
Also, we're gonna do them stop motion. It's
Wow.
already contract. It's already contracted. Like we're done. Like it's been bid. We're doing it this way. Done. And so this dude, literally on his own time, did went in a little cave like ILM and did a test of the T Rex walking.
Hmm.
It's a lot more technical than that and things like that. And then he positioned his monitor in a way that face outward of in office or I'm kind of paraphrasing what the story is. So when Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy walked by for a meeting that day, he knew they would glance at it, and
Yeah.
Spielberg would go, "Wait a minute, what is that?" And that's when they're like, "Oh wow, we can do the dinosaurs on the computer." And it
Good
was
for
that
him.
level of
That's awesome. I have to check
of
that out. That's an
oh
awesome,
yeah,
awesome story. That's
it
incredible.
is, and talks about like how, like the entire industry is shaped by the film industry. Like Photoshop was developed during Terminator 2,
Mm. Wow, I
right?
didn't know
But
that
there was
either.
just they're like they needed a way to put the fire in front and behind the thing, and they're like, I don't know, make a program called
Wow.
Photoshop. So it was like,
Whoa.
and because VFX margins are so small, they were like, Adobe came in and offered to buy it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's whenever they can internally develop a piece of software that makes a ton of money, studios
Yeah,
will sell it. And it'll
incredible.
go, so it's just these stories of the renegades in the special effects industry and the folks that break the rules and get in trouble and do that kind of stuff are the ones that tend to revolutionize
Yeah,
what storytelling is,
yeah.
and that's what's so like I think that's what draws me to it is it's like it's not the straight A's, it's not the PhDs, it's not the like when it comes to creativity and animation, storytelling, special effects, movies, all that kind of stuff. It's the folks that, kind of just wanted to think a little bit differently and take risks and do different things. And that's where,
It's
some of the
American.
brilliance and the
It's
crazy comes
super
in.
American.
Yeah. Yep. It sure is. Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah, I have a lot of hope for the future of that because I think we're living through that. I think post-COVID, for a lot of institutions and a lot of the world, a lot of institutions crumbled, and a lot of, at least in America, and a lot of people, or a lot of trust in them crumbled.
Uh-huh.
And then a lot of people started saying, "Well, why not do things this way?"
Yeah.
And the answer, and there really was no good answer until now, except for you shouldn't because it's always worked because our way always worked. You're like, well, your way isn't
Yeah.
really working right now. So, I think I'm
Yeah.
going to do this way, and I don't mind breaking a couple of rules. I'm going to give you a choice. What do you want to talk about
Yeah.
now? Whether you want to talk about AI, which I hope you're not sick of hearing about,
Yeah.
or whether we're living in a matrix
Yeah.
or
I mean,
simulation,
oh man, I don't think we're living in a
or both.
simulation. Yeah. I
You don't think
mean,
so?
I don't think we're living in a simulation. I think if we're living in something that's not what we perceive, it is so beyond our understanding that we wouldn't even be able to describe it as a simulation. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I like that
Like
answer.
I
By
think
the way,
it's beyond our understanding of what it is, and it's so beyond what we would call a simulation that it's
yeah.
just like even a remote small explanation of it, our brains would explode.
Yeah.
You know.
Are you religious? Are you spiritual or either?
A little bit. I was born and raised Catholic.
Mhm.
So dive into that. But I'm like, if God ever spoke to us, your head would probably explode. Like like that's kind of how I figure. It's like if we are in the Matrix, it's incomprehensible to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Doesn't mean what I do, but, I'm curious if you're in this world and you see so much of, like, this stuff, and I forgot what, I think it was Elon that said that
eh,
based on the way that technology is now, the odds that it hasn't been that way, or at least our perception of reality, that hasn't been affected in some kind of way by tech is slim t or is very, very, very low. Do you subscribe to that kind of idea?
I do. I think that it's crazy when you just zoom out, right? And you look at the history of human existence.
Mary Poppins, yeah, well, human existence, but I was
Yeah.
thinking of even Mary Poppins till today. I mean, think about that.
Yeah. Nuts. It's just you just look at like, whatever belief you subscribe to how old the world is. No matter what that is, if you look at just a zoomed out timeline of how much we've actually I mean, we've taught sand to think,
Have
like
we?
that's what silicone is. I mean, that's what computer chips are. They're made out of sand.
Right,
Like that's
right, right.
silicone, so it's like we've literally taken sand and glass and manipulated it in a way that it can actually think and process and do things. And it's just crazy. And it's how fast in the grand scheme of things in the world that
To
has
blink.
changed.
Yeah.
It's a blank. It is a literal blank. And so whenever someone says, okay, this is how it's going to be in the future, 99% of it is going to be BS.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, and we have a great example in Back to the Future Part 2, right? Like, you look at the 80s and the 90s, and they said, this is what the future's going to be, right? And that
Yes,
was all
sir.
based on the perception of, like what Henry Ford said. Well, if you gave people what they want, they would have said faster horses. And that's kind of what Back to the Future 2 did, is they're like, faster horses. We have cars. Okay, now they're going to fly. Okay, we have, you can fax machine now anywhere in the world. They never thought of like, you're going to have a supercomputer in your pocket, kind of a thing. It's like that kind of, I think it's going to change in a way that we genuinely cannot understand or cannot predict, especially when like quantum computing comes online. That's going to change everything. So, anyone that tries to claim they know what the future is, I think is full of crap, because nobody in the existence of humanity has predicted that far into the future.
Yeah, I feel that way
it's been
about AI
correct.
people. I feel hugely that way about AI people. I'm like, if the doomers or the optimists. I'm like, how do how do we we're only like, our brains are so limited to thinking, are so limited to just being able to perceive a tiny portion of the context of the world that we live in, like, and anything that like challenges that causes us to short wire. Like, what makes you think you're able to figure this out? Like this science or this development is objective. It doesn't care about your perception of things. It doesn't care about what you think the world should be or is going to be or going to be. Like, whatever life it takes on is going to be its own. And like, we have no idea what that is.
No idea what that is. And if you anyone that was, I would say, in the last throes of their lives, like in the late 70s, early 80s, and had a time machine and showed them today, they were like, that's not at all how I thought it would have went. like zero at all.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I remember being a little kid, as another like core memory, my grandfather on my mother's side. I remember him telling me, this is, God, it must have been 6 or 7 maybe, which is how crazy that, I have this memory. And he goes, I don't know if it's going to be in your lifetime or I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime. I don't know if it's going to be your lifetime, but one day they're going to have it where you can talk and then it's going to type or like print what you said. And I'm like, oh dear God, if he was still alive today, he'd be like, what the hell is going on? It's just like, it's crazy. And then what happens is we used to have, we tend to have these breakthroughs in technology or realization that then things just take a 90-degree turn. It's like, boom, 90 degrees. That track you thought you were going on is just obliterated. Like, bye, don't even think about doing that anymore, So yeah, the only advantage I think we have in terms of people that have been around in the past 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years is we know that there's change and we expect it, which is cool. So we're not afraid of the change. I think it's like, the boomer generation and before, a little afraid of change. I was part of the generation where it's like, we had AOL, we had dial-up, that wasn't scary. We were burning CDs. We were, we had the advent of cell phones and social media and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, we're not really afraid of the change, which is an advantage. But then I also see a little bit of like a reset coming with, our children that are very young. We're like, they can barely use a game controller, but they're like on these iPads and these touch screens, like, like doing things faster at like super, super young ages, because that's how they learn to, interface with this technology. So it's just, and what is that going to do to their brain? Not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's like, if they're used to everything being a touch screen, how does that develop in how they want to interface with the world? So it's very interesting to kind of see, how that ebbs and flows. But yeah, I'm with you. Anyone that says, oh, AI is going to do this, like, I don't know. AI is either going to be like Terminator and it's going to kill us all and we're all dead, or it's going to be an incredible, tool that we're going to learn to live with it. And then the bad stuff is not going to be there, or it's going to take over the entire world and we're going to learn we're in the Matrix or something. And, it's like something's going to happen. Nobody can predict what it is. So it's creeping into different aspects of everyday life. I think right now marketing has taken hold of it. If you go to CES, that's the Consumer Electronics Show. That's usually held in Vegas every year, where they show. Last year's was very, very, very kind of low reviewed because it was supposed to be the Consumer Electronics Show. So like, the new TVs coming out and the new cool smart things for your home and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it was like, hey, we got this vacuum cleaner that is like on a drone, and it can go up your stairs and do like your upstairs, and they're like, it's $30,000, and you're like,
And they're selling
okay.
your data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's also uploading the scan of your house to like everything. You're like, how is that, whatever. And then you have all these corporations out there being like, we're building new AI data centers and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, what? But it was AI everything. And
Yeah.
now you're starting to see on every ad, uh, you know, AI this, AI toaster, AI fridge, AI, so marketing got a hold of it. I think it's too much of a buzzword right now. So
Yeah.
I'm waiting to get over this AI hump of everything being AI because it's so oversaturated. I don't think the general consumer even knows what AI is
Well,
at this point.
are animators concerned about AI? I mean, they've got to be a little bit, no?
So big, yeah. I mean, big discussions going on right now, even in like Hollywood, and animators are there is a concern because of course being a business driven industry, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's there to make money, right?
Yeah.
If you have some executive somewhere going like, well, I can pay an animator or a group of animators X millions to do this movie, or I can just go prompt an AI and it costs me, 30 grand of tokens to do the exact same thing. Not that it's that cheap, because once,
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
like,
It's not that
a
it's
whole
not
other
even
story.
much cheaper at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. And so, once these data centers have to start making their money back, we're going to see AI get real expensive real quick. But, they're going to go, okay, go do that. But I've seen something very interesting happen. Very, very, very interesting happen is, and I sound so old and like old, get off my lawn, kids, like saying this, but we're noticing that, kids, teenagers and before in this day and age, in 2026, they can identify AI art and animation almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like they go like, boom, there's like, boom, that's AI. I don't want to see it. And even as a seasoned animator, sometimes you kind of look at it and you're like, hold on, I gotta look for some things. Like I'm like a 9 out of 10. I could do it, but sometimes it's hard to tell, and you're just like, there it is. Yep, that's AI. It rarely tricks me. And I've seen some of these teenagers take these tests, and they're just like, AI, not AI, AI, not AI, not AI. And I'm like,
it's intuitive.
What are you even looking for? Yeah, they're used to seeing these tells inside of AI because AI on the animation and the art side of things is starting to now just train on itself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's creating these kind of like redundancy loops that is just, it's like, why is that green? Because it's blue, because it's green, because it's blue, because it's green, and then circles into a tornado. And then a lot of it is just starting to have this kind of same look to it. And they're almost unanimously rejecting AI.
Yeah.
And NVIDIA, who I'm a huge fan of, I love, working with their, like graphics cards and all that kind of stuff. I'm a huge graphics nut and I love that kind of stuff. They recently debuted a technology in their DLSS technology that not only upscaled images and inserted frames to get better frame rates and all these things, but they kind of like used AI to touch up the characters a little bit in some of these like beloved games. And it was almost unanimously rejected.
Whoa.
Like across the entire industry, because everyone's like,
AI.
AI slop, look at this AI slop, and it's like, yeah, I mean, people.
I believe. Listen, I mean, what I think is really cool about that, right, is that I think that it actually would encourage people to use AI for what it's good for, which is a tool and not to be a replacement for the work, for doing it. And it's funny, I was giving a essay to my students, and I typically have them write out the essays because one thing that I was wrestling with was what's the point of being an English teacher, because I mean essays are out the roof, as far as anyone's concerned, and but there's a lot to thinking, there's a lot to communicating, there's a lot to processing, there's a lot to expressing yourself, and so I would always have them write. And one student did work at home, and he was a senior, and I already had him for 3 of the 4 years of high school. So I'm like, dude, just tell me, use AI for this. He's like, yeah, but not for all of it. And I was like, okay, did you use it to touch up the vocabulary or whatever? He's like, no, use it for the idea. And I'm like, no, that's exactly the opposite of what I want to hear. What I want to hear. Like, you're supposed to use AI for, like, the ideas are supposed to be yours. If you want help with the formatting, you want help with the structure, you want it to touch up your, your sentences, that's fine. But I don't want it to do your thinking for you, dude. That's not cool. And I think he got it, but but we'll be able to. Again, the quality is very very discernible, and I guess it is intuitive, or I mean, or a pattern that we don't even know how to necessarily articulate.
Yeah, we don't. That's the thing is we don't know what it's gonna do because like that example with your student, it's like, yeah, I came up with the idea. What's the big deal? Duh. And
Mhm.
that's I think the equivalence of us using our phone to do like math. Because back in the day, like, you're not gonna have a what are you gonna have a calculator? You're gonna carry around a calculator in your pocket? We're like, like, I'm gonna carry a supercomputer around in my pocket that has access to every book and every library in the world. So and
And then
it's like
summarize it to me in two
and then
seconds.
summarize it in 2 seconds. So it's just like, does that make you a lazy thinker or does that enable you to boost your brain to a level beyond what it is? And I think there's a very fine line when it comes to AI, in the arts and in literature and in,
Yeah.
learning. Cause it's like, if you use it as a force multiplier,
Mhm.
you're gonna be like a super genius. If you
Yes.
use it as a crutch to be lazy, then you're not actually gonna ever absorb the material. Right.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
it's I don't think we're at the point as a society yet where we know how to teach AI. We don't know
Yeah.
how to responsibly teach it because I don't think the people that are even at the top know how to responsibly do it.
They don't. They
And
don't know how to
there's certain
train it.
they
Forget
don't know
about
how to train.
teach
They
it.
don't.
They don't know
Yeah,
anything about it. We don't know the reason why we can't predict it is because it's being trained on Reddit and the internet and
yeah,
Twitter
exactly.
and like, Jesus Christ, man. Like if you're afraid of doomsday, don't feed it Reddit information. Like
Exactly. Yeah, and so oh my yeah, I had a
you're gonna
buddy that
get
was
from
just like
4chan on my Grok, and I'm like, "Oh my god,
yeah.
dude."
Yeah, I was like, "What's your source?" They're like some random 4chan, but you're like, "Oh no,"
Yeah.
and so it's I don't like it did a really awesome thing the other day where it like summarized all my emails in a particular category
Mhm.
as one thing, and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome! That just saved me
Yes.
like 9 hours of work." Hell yeah!
Yeah.
And then it did something the other day where it spoke with such authority on something that I knew was wrong, and I was like, "No, I know factually what you just said is incorrect because literally I am the patent holder on this." And then it apologized. It was like, I am so sorry. You are a million times correct. Oh my God, you must have lost all trust in me. You are right. That was wrong. I'm sorry for speaking with such authority on it. I'm like, but I just lost all trust in this,
Yeah.
Like I just completely lost all trust in it because you gave me something as a fact that you put your stamp of approval on, and it was just BS. It was
Yeah,
just
it's a
made up.
search engine.
Yeah.
That's what it's best used for.
Yeah, I think we're when it comes to animation, the arts and film and things like that. I think the executives, like any company, are watering at the mouth because they're like, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
can just like type a thing for a movie, and then like 4 hours later, the movie's made. You go get it in the theaters, do it, like go
Mhm.
do that, and then and so that's how there's because any industry. I'm reading so many articles now about how CEOs are now hiring back a bunch of people because
Yeah.
the bill for AI is coming back. And they're just like, oh, it's not free? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And this is also at an incredible discount, too. Like, this is at a huge discount because all these companies are operating at a loss.
Yeah.
So when Wall Street wants to get an ROI,
Oh,
from
baby.
them, they're
We're
going to
in
be
trouble.
like,
Uh-huh.
we're in big trouble. So again, there's so many variables, so many different things. I think it's definitely going to be part of our future. I want it to solve complications that make my life easier. I
Yeah.
don't want it making my art.
I agree with you.
Like
Yeah.
that's kind of my stance at it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I use it. It's so cool, and I'll let you go in a minute to get ready for your class. But honestly, man, I would love to have you back again because this is so much fun.
Yeah, yeah.
But I can't tell you how much time it's saved in my life with my podcast. Where I used to have to go through Google and LinkedIn and
Hmm.
whatever and find guests. And now I go to Grok and I'm like, I want to speak to 10 people that are both animators and educators, and only include people whose email addresses are publicly available. Boom, and
That's
once every
amazing.
8 hours
Yeah.
of work a week, minimum 8-10 hours a week that I would just go and I was going through one person at a time. It was insanely slow
Oh
progress,
yeah.
and like this made my life way easier. I ask it for leads for I sell medical equipment.
Mhm.
Give me 50 leads in the Fort Lauderdale area, in the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood area of people that buy refurbished medical equipment. I'll give them calls and I'll give them calls. I'll shoot them an email. boom, done. I mean, like that's incredible, but I've never, ever used it to write anything. I've never used it to come up with anything
Yeah.
for me. And like, man, that's like, and I was a creative writing literature major. I was,
Mhm.
I was, I guess a little snobby about that, but I can't even imagine that it would be more effective. Even the emails that like it tries to correct my emails, like these little blue dots. I'm like, leave me the hell alone, man. This is the
Yeah,
way I
right, yeah,
type. Like,
yeah.
this is the way I talk.
I meant to say that, yeah. Yeah. No,
But
I get it. It's a very interesting thing. I don't think I think the only thing predictable about it is it's gonna be unpredictable. I think that's it.
yes, yeah,
Like, it's, gonna be that way, but it's gonna be interesting. A lot of companies are investing a lot of money on it, Um, back in, visual effects, what's interesting about it too is like we had AI for a very, very long time, like in the video game industry, because the bad guys that you would go up against
mhm,
that were controlled by the computer, those were called AIs, right? Because they had to think, they
yeah.
had to, way back in the day, I remember like playing GoldenEye on like Nintendo 64, and you would like, shoot the gun out of the guy's hand, and the guy would go pick the gun back up and then go like hide. And I was like, that's amazing. That guy just like fought for himself. And this is done on like, you know, like a Nintendo 64. That thing
Yeah,
is
like Smash Bros, you
like
fight the
yeah.
computer.
Yeah, but like Motorola Razr phones had more processing power than like a Nintendo 64, and that thing's like thinking. So we've been exposed to AI. We've been exposed to computers that can think and adapt. And in visual effects, they do a lot of cool stuff where they like have it. I remember kind of years ago, we did stuff where we would use it to generate like blood flow map, right?
Yeah,
To get like Thanos and characters like that to get
right.
their, what's right below the surface of the skin to act more realistically. And it's like we can
Cool.
either hand paint all
Incredible.
that, or you can do the calculations of like blood flow, and that will help you get like things like subsurface scattering of light and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, technically that's AI.
Yeah.
So it's this weird, AI is different depending on the use cases that it is. And like you said, nobody knows what it is yet. So it's like no, like the people that make it can't even describe it.
Yeah,
But yeah, all I
crazy.
know is that the AI driven robots, I love the videos where it shows people like kicking like, the Boston Dynamic robot and stuff like that. And then it just cuts to like 30 years in the future. And then they just show the clip of like Terminator of all the robots like shooting. Like robots never forget,
Or
So
I'm saving, or I'm hoping for. I don't know if you saw the meme of like the Terminator or the AI saving the one that said "please tit" like in one of the prompts, or "thank you." Like, no, this one was nice to us.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
right. Yeah. 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 This one can live, So but yeah, really interesting. Like I'm always got my because I have to with my job.
Yeah,
Like we have to
sure.
be at like the bleeding edge of technology and
Yeah,
things like that because people pay thousands of dollars from around the world to come see what we can do.
yeah.
So yeah, always up for talking about movies, games, all the bleeding edge stuff and. Because that's what I have to breathe every single day. If I'm not at the razor's edge of all this, then I'm not doing my job.
I gotcha. Tony, this is so much freaking fun, man. Thank you so much. This was really you're an awesome guest, and that your experience is out of this world, man. It's super super cool, and I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. And again, let's talk again. Let's be in touch, and a little bit down the line, we'll record
For
another
sure.
episode for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having such an awesome podcast. Yeah, this is great, and I think that's just the questions you asked were like, oh yeah, that's great. I do kind of want to talk to somebody about that. So
Awesome.
awesome
Okay. Well,
stuff, man.
next time
Great.
you can send me a list of things that you want to talk about, and I'll just let you. I'll let you take.
Yeah.
I'll let go of the reins. I'll be happy to
No,
let you go.
cool,
Thank you
man.
so much, man. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
we'll
it.
talk soon.
Yep.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Have an awesome night.